think YouTube has finally caught up. Hi, folks. I literally just got home. As you can tell by the late start. Oh, man, what a week. So, we're gonna talk a short bit, like usual, of random stuff before we get into the subject. We'll let people get notifications, show up, all that kind of usual jazz. Yeah, to confirm what Paul is saying, I was definitely a little late getting home. I got basically downstairs in my house at like 5:59. Had to hustle my butt up the stairs to get this thing rolling. But thankfully I had most of my gear like pre-ready, so didn't take too long. Just had to get a light on and sit down and make sure my software was working. So, let's talk a couple random things. I had my one of my FX6s die out on me, and I don't know. I don't think it's dead. I think I just need to like pull the impeller completely apart and like super thoroughly clean it. But when you don't have water flow in an FX6, it can be like ultra paranoia, you know, but also maybe more importantly, if you don't have water flow and you stop your inlet and outlet, it can build pressure that when you pop it will basically splatter you with a ton of water. So while I was working on said filter, trying to bring it back to life, and one sec, I'll try and fix some audio. I'm not sure why it's quite as low as it appears to be, but we can fix it. I got to monkey with this part back here. I gotta remember which one it is. I think. Hold on, we're doing this the hard way. I don't remember which one's my gain and which one's my audio mode. So if we do this a little bit. Better. Hopefully that's slightly louder, but I'm not sure why. It might be that there's a little more ambient noise, so it's being strange. It's a little hotter here, so I got some fans running to keep this room cool for my dog. Yeah, I keep the room cool for my dog. Anyway, so I'm working on this FX6, and we'll tell a story, and then we'll get into the topic. And I open the inlet valve, and as soon as like it now has back pressure, it just shoots this giant jet of water up all over my chest. And so like the whole front of my shirt that I'm wearing just gets soaked. I was just like, oh, I haven't even started working on this thing. Great. And I kind of forgot because like every other time I've worked on it, I've had the pump running, so I'll close the inlet and I'll leave the outlet open for a few seconds to let the canister pump some of the excess water out of the body before I'll close that off and turn the pump off. But with the pump not pumping water, I can't do that, right? So I didn't think about it because I'm like, oh yeah, we'll close the inlet. Okay, no more water's coming in. That's good. Now we'll close the outlet. Okay, we should be fine. We'll just open these things up, and it'll spill a tiny amount of water sometimes, but usually not too bad. Giant jet of water just completely soaks my chest and part of my face. Yeah, it's like one of those things where we're like, oh yeah, there's nothing to push water out, so pressure creates, and there's no air escaping, so the second I open it, kaboom. I'll probably have to. I've had a few people recently like, where's your review of the FX6? So I probably have to review an FX6 at some point. That's gonna be fun. We'll talk about little funny things like that. Well, to be fair, like that particular filter had been, it's the secondary filter on the Guppy Mansion. So yeah. But yeah, oh yeah, it would have, Chubby Guppy, it totally would have been gold YouTube moment. And I'm sure I could reproduce it if I wanted to, but I don't necessarily want to like jet myself with fish tank water all over again. So, we had one question I want to answer before we go in there. Another reason to use an Eheim canister. I don't necessarily know that stops. I've had Eheim canisters do stuff too. But, yeah, this is just because the pump was not pushing water. All right, so Paul Sotero asked about the Heiger 8-gallon tank. Or rather, what have I decided what I'm going to do with it? I have to respond to the person from Heiger that reached out to me. I haven't done that yet. I worked all last weekend. I've been working quite a lot. We're at the tail end of this major milestone with our customer, so that's a big thing, and we're all kind of sprinting for the finish line, so to speak. So I have to get back to them. I just haven't had time. But one of our big bosses, kind of high up the chain, is flying into town this week to walk through all the test teams and get a better understanding of what we all do in person. So, I've been preparing a presentation, and I'm only slightly nervous about that, right? Right? One of those things where you're like, okay, we gotta really, really go that level, that extra mile. But anyway, as far as the 8-gallon is concerned, yeah, I do have a couple ideas. So one thing that somebody actually mentioned in a comment, they read my mind, which is I want to do a comparison, because it's 8 gallons, to if you just bought a 10-gallon tank, right? And built a 10-gallon tank, and the equipment, instead of all the internal stuff to that Heiger, what ends up being better for you as a person. But so that's my idea. And as far as what goes in the tank and how we're going to do it, yes, I have stuff, but I don't want to spoil it too much. I'll spoil that part, that we're going to do a comparison. But maybe, just maybe, it'll be similar to what we did for our brother-in-law James, and we'll do that for someone else. All right. So let's get on topic for a sec, and then we'll answer more questions. Okay, never mind. I'll answer this one. Chris Trapp, Bentley, are you the silent partner in Aquarium Co-op? Aquarium Co-op established themselves before I came back to the hobby. I did not know Corey until he had his shop and his YouTube channel for, he'd had a shop for a couple of years and his YouTube channel for a year and a half, something like that. So, no, definitely not. Also, I probably would have never invested in an aquarium store. just saying, with money where I do my investments, what little I have would not be an aquarium store. All right, let's talk topic. Danikin Aquatics, thank you. Good to see you here. So, we've had a lot of FishTubers lately who have opened stores in one way, shape, or form. You've got, and this does not, I'm not counting people who have had businesses and YouTube is a side part of their business. So, Aquarium Co-op, Dustin's Fish Tanks, Green Aqua. These are all examples that I'm not going to talk about, right? We're talking about, so there's Fish Boy is an example, right? He's opened a brick and mortar store. My friend Jason, Redfish Bluefish, opened a brick and mortar store. We've got people who have created more online only stores. So that's KG Tropicals with, what is it? Keep Fish Keeping, right? Their name always slightly confuses me, and I worry that it's wrong, even though I think, I always know that that's correct, but it just, the way it sounds to me, I'm always like, is that right? That seems like it's wrong. Oh, did his website go MIA? That's interesting. So Fishboy's website apparently went MIA, but he has a physical store, right? Or at least there's some part of a physical store. So the question is, with the number of hobbyists, and I have two different takes that I want to take here, because this is kind of an open conversation. I have two different takes on this, and is this actually good for our hobby? So, the first take, I'm going to go in the negative immediately, right? Let's be a little inflammatory and cause some problems, cause some mischief, if you will, and say no, it's not good for the hobby. And let me explain where I think there's an argument that this is not good for the hobby. Okay? If a majority of our like FishTube personalities, whether they're large channels or small channels, you could think about people like Jadron Aquatics, right? He's opened a virtual store. You've got people like Michael's Fish Room, who I think he's kind of had a store as long as he's had a YouTube channel, but we'll kind of like sort of loop him in, right? Not entirely, but people who have a pure digital presence, right? They, in a sense, can be taking business away from our local fish stores. Now, let's be honest here. There are plenty of people who have not so great local fish stores. There are folks that have local fish stores that, you know, maybe they don't take that great of care, or they've been around a really long time and they do other things, and fish isn't their primary thing. But for the local fish stores that are out there that maybe aren't as digitally savvy, as technologically savvy, I can English. These online businesses very well can take business away from those local fish stores. And without a local fish store, even some of the ones that aren't so great, it can be really hard to get new people local to you into the hobby, right? And sometimes they don't have the kind of fish that you want to keep, right? So like Steven's mentioning right here, love my local fish store, but they never have any good rainbows. Yeah, sometimes that's tough. Now, there's an argument here that I think is important, and don't worry, we're going to get to that from Cancer Train, but you could say that, well, of course, the bad ones just kind of deserve adapt or die, right? But think about it this way. So many of our fish, and even Corey has mentioned this recently in a live stream, seeing a picture is not enough to understand that fish and whether or not that fish is something that would intrigue you more had you seen it in person. I can tell you a number of fish very easily. The Kochu Tetra, several rainbows, even my blue Hawaiian Moscow guppies, right? If you see them in person, they're so much different than what you see in a video, than what you see in a picture. There's just so many different things that you can't see unless you're there in front of them with your actual eyes. Because it's so hard to capture. Right? So we could argue that without local fish stores carrying those kind of fish right in front of us, we might not ever appreciate certain fish that are out there in the hobby. It might be very hard to go like, yeah, I want to get that fish that looks like this. Or maybe more importantly, right? Maybe it's the opposite. We get a picture of a fish and it looks amazing. The color is super vibrant. It's incredible. And then we get it in and it looks nothing like that. And we're like, hey, you sold me the wrong fish. This happens all the time with like a pistos. And, you know, I was talking recently with Jason of Redfish Bluefish, because he's a big Episto nerd, that it has to be tough on people like him who specialize in things like Epistos, because often the photography that's out there or taken of those fish is when they're in full breeding dress, they're in maximum color, and your average person is going to see that and not go, oh, that's what it can look like when it's at full color and breeding dress, not what it looks like every day. They just assume that's what that fish looks like every day. Oh man, I have to have it. And then you get it and it doesn't look like that. And you're just like, you son of a, right? There's plenty of people, and I am confident that lots of online sellers deal with this, because I've had people complain to me about an online seller. It's just like, right? But it's still this thing where, like, without seeing that fish in person and being like, oh, it looks like that most of the time, but when you, and then here's the picture when you get it in full breeding dress, right? When you get the male and female and they court, you get to see this. And this is what you're after, because you get to see this a couple times a month or for a few days a month, and this is when you're just like, this is why I have this fish. This is that exciting time, right? This is what makes it magical. Not like, I got gypped I got screwed over. Send me this dull fish. This is one I ordered. I ordered this one here in the picture, right? You get people that get kind of, right? But man, I'll tell you. I'll tell you, like, that's the worry that I have about a lot of the online seller sites. So that's where I think, like, you could argue that FishTubers who open their own store, especially digital-only stores, could, in theory, not be benefiting the hobby. The other thing that we have to worry about, the second part to this argument, is the second that they have something where they're selling something, do you now have to change the amount in which you trust their information, because now they stand to make money? So are they going to be 100% honest that item X has XYZ downside, because they would sell less if they're straight up with it, right? And I'm not saying that we have any members of the FishTube community who've opened stores that do that. I'm more saying that there's that instant skeptical doubt, right? Of like, well, you're selling it. Are you really being straight with me, or are you just jazzing it up to increase your sales? You know, there's that fear that has to be there. Now, in theory, hopefully that person you've had is a very trustworthy source for a long time, and the things that they're carrying because they feel it's the best one out there. An example would be like with John and Lisa of KG Tropicals doing Keep Fish Keeping. They're carrying the tidal filters because they feel that's the best hang on back to them. Right? We have that. Oh, Skipper's Aquarium. Oh, hold on, my friend. Hold on. I see where you're going, but don't worry. We're going to go to the flip side of this coin. Right? So there's the negative side. Let's talk the positive side. Let's say, yes, this certainly is good for the hobby. Right? There are several people in chat who've already said, well, you know, bad fish stores dying out because good people open an online or even a physical store that happens to ship. Nothing wrong with that, right? Now we're talking about people who do this because they love it, absolutely love it, and have decided that they're going to take that love and that passion and help bring that customer service and product knowledge or fish knowledge or plant knowledge, whatever it may be, to us, the hobbyists, right? That's, you know, Corey from Aquarium Co-op many times has said, you want to open a fish store, go work in someone else's fish store and learn the business so that you know all the business side, so that that passion is still there after you've worked for someone else. Now you know what to do and what not to do based on those people, right? Or, great example from chat, Dan's Fish. We all know that I love Dan. I love Dan's Fish. I've ordered from him 4 times. Is that right? 3 or 4? And none of my orders are small. Keep in mind, I think my smallest order from Dan's Fish was like $400. Because I'm a crazy person that buys in number. But you have people who are doing it different than what most of the stores are doing, right? They get it from a distributor, and that distributor got it from some other smaller farm or distributor, or it got shipped up and it went through this distributor to that distributor to them, and now they've shipped it to you, and it's gone through like 800 pairs of hands, and who knows how healthy that fish is. Whereas Dan, it's direct from the person that bred it or caught it in the wild to him, stays with him for a month, going through quarantine, making sure it's nice and healthy. You've got other people who do very similar in like the shrimp side of life. A great example would be like Buy Pet Shrimp with Eric Lucas. He works directly with a farm or a shrimpy business. My good friend there. We go with Nick, who we're talking about, a guy who just loves his shrimp, works directly with one farm and one farm only. And, you know, he brings them in, he quarantines them for a long time. Like, these are all people doing it the way that we could hope for the absolute best. People who truly love and care for every animal that goes through their hands to make sure that we, the hobbyist, are getting the best possible example of that animal, right? And yeah, there's a lot of love coming for Dan. I hope there's a lot of love for those of you who've ever like worked with Eric Lucas or Nick over at Shrimpy Business. You know, those guys also do a phenomenal job. They're just the shrimp side. But You could also argue that like you get people who are extremely passionate and relatively knowledgeable, right? Maybe not like an ichthyologist level, but you've got people like Jadron Aquatics working with Papa Shrimp, right? These two have combined to make a business. You have, of course, John and Lisa keep fish keeping. You have Michael's Fish Room, right? He's a big guppy nerd. He finds all sorts of sweet guppies, takes his care of them, does lots of education on the side to help the people who might potentially buy guppies from him have great success with them, right? We've got a lot of good examples out there. You've got my friend Jason, Redfish Bluefish, who opened his own store because he had an opportunity to get fish direct from sources that basically no one else is using, really, that have really, really high quality European strains of fish, which it's not very common in the United States to have the European strains. You know, you've got lots of options that are great examples, and these are people who are extremely passionate about the hobby, and their goal is to deliver something different or better to us, the hobbyists, than what we would see at maybe a not so great local fish store or your big box stores like your Petco's, your PetSmarts, where they just kind of all carry the same generic stuff. This is getting you something a little different, and that's where it's good for the hobby, right? So there's two sides to this, right? Because I think that we have that potential negative where like some local fish stores, maybe they're not perfect, maybe they're not like the aquarium co-ops, right? Or some of the amazing stores that are out there. There's lots of really amazing stores that have been toured over time, but they're still good fish stores, right? I can name a couple, but I won't. that that are near me that I drive much farther than their store to go to places like Aquarium Co-op, because there are things that they do that I think was like, oh, I'm not getting the best quality I could get because of the way they do things. I'll go to that store that I know is doing things in a way that gives me significantly better quality or better customer service, right? Those are the things that we look at. I would hope at least we look at as fish keepers when we have options. Not everybody has those options. Not everybody's in the Seattle area where we have a surprising number of fish stores. But the question is, if we have maybe that fish store that's not as technically savvy, they don't know how to use social media to help them, but they still get walk-in traffic, and that traffic can generate people that would come into the hobby that might then go find the online side of things, find dumb YouTubers like me, right? Or like the ones that have open stores that we've talked about. And what happens if they go, oh, well, I really like this YouTuber, I'm going to buy from them, and I stop buying from that store that brought me into the hobby. And if that store goes away, how are you going to get more people like that who just walk in off the street and see fish and go, I really dig that. I think I want to keep fish as a pet instead of a dog or a cat or a bird or whatever, right? So I think there's two sides. I think there's two sides to this argument. Chat, you've been phenomenal. Like, most of you feel it's a positive, which I generally agree. For the most part, most of the FishTubers or YouTubers, if they don't want to call themselves FishTubers, that I've seen open stores are all really passionate people that don't feel like they're doing it purely for money. They feel like they're doing it because they love it. Right? But it's still reasonable to question a few things. Can there be negatives? Eric's got an interesting question. I'm going to answer that in just a sec. I want to address a couple things. I've been babbling a lot. Fish Tank Barn, Mike, thank you for the tip jar. I greatly appreciate it. Rico Stan, you and I gotta talk, hopefully in person sometime soon. You're one of the people that, of all the people I've talked to who've asked me onto their stream, you're like at the tippy top of the list of somebody I just want to sit down and either have a meal with or have a beverage with, depending on your flavor, what you prefer, right? But we got to be able to talk in person at some point. Hopefully, it won't be me going anywhere this year for any conventions, because the ones that are left are in places that are having issues with human malware. and I don't want to deal with that. But thanks, buddy. I appreciate you just as much as you appreciate me. And then Mark, welcome to Auto Sync List, man. Welcome to becoming a member. Thank you. All right, guys. So let's do questions. We'll do Q&A now, and we can still talk questions related to the subject. At Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see your question. And if for some reason I don't get to your question, you're welcome to email me, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. I'll have it in chat for the folks who are here live. Feel free to email me, especially if you're trying to get on In-Depth Solutions. I'm reasonably caught up. There's a few people I've got to get from right before the weekend, but other than that, I've got reasonably caught up on myself. So Paul Soltero said, I'd be happy with anybody opening a good local fish store less than an hour from me. Until that happens, most of my fish come ordered on a computer screen. Yeah, and I think that's one of the best arguments for people in the YouTube space opening their own fish stores, especially if they are getting stuff you don't get to see normally on like your Aquabids or your big box stores, right? Something that's a little different. That's where it's a huge benefit. If you don't have a local fish store and there's more variety that comes on because like, oh, this guy opened a store and he focuses on this, and this guy opened a store and he focuses on that, and she opened a store and she's really good at this, right? And it gives you more and more variety for a lot of different things. It opens up our options, and the more options, the better, right? You just got to hope that they have enough customers to maintain that business if they hyper specialize. You know, if I were ever to be like, I guess you would say like pseudo retired, where I didn't have to do my normal profession, the only thing I would ever sell would be plants. But I probably wouldn't go like your Jacob's Aquarium or Dustin's Fish Tanks or anything like that, where you're bringing in plants from farms. I would probably only deal with stuff I grew myself, which means it's basically not a business. It's a hobby where you just happen to sell your cuttings because you can't possibly keep up with demand only growing it yourself. It's nigh impossible without acres and acres and acres of growing space. It's pretty ludicrous. But yeah, cancer train, those Manakapuru Super Reds got me. Dude, those fish are so sick. I've seen some of the ones that are at Jason's store that have colored up over time. I personally like the red shoulder a little bit more, but that's because I have a love for the Scaleri and Brain Altum Leopoldi like barred body types and just the differences in them. So when you get like that kind of body type, but you get that like red streak up in the top of the fish, that's just something that I really love. And that's just personal taste. But those Super Reds, quite nice. And yeah, so like Adam's mentioning, all I have access to is a Petco or PetSmart. I think the closest local freshwater fish store is about an hour and a half away. Is there any place I don't know of them in the Mississippi area? You know, I'm not sure. I certainly don't know the South all that well. But that would be something where that's where you benefit by having those online businesses, right? But the question is like, if you were for some reason didn't know about a fish store and you relied 100% on a set of YouTubers who sell fish, then will that local fish store you maybe didn't know about, some kind of like hidden jewel that just doesn't know how to advertise or is in a weird spot so they're not easily visible, do they die out because of that? You never know. Like, we've got a couple fish stores near me that are not doing so great, and they've been around, like one of them's been around since the 70s, and a lot of it is they haven't updated themselves. They're definitely very old school mentality, and you walk in there and it's like, yeah, it's smells like a fish store, old fish store, and there's water on the concrete floors, and there's those things where you're just like, I could go to this other store that's nice and clean and not the 70s, right? And you might just completely ignore that place that may be a good fish store, but just hasn't kept up with the times as far as like retail. That's like one of the things where just like places like that, somebody asks like, do they deserve to stay open, right? If they can't figure out how to adapt things. So I got my trying to make sure I didn't miss any good questions. There's like the armada of people who love Dan's fish, which I don't blame you. I love Dan too. Dan's amazing. There's a reason that when I do giveaways, you can basically guarantee I'm going to give away a gift certificate to Dan's fish out of my own pocket. I just pay for them because I love his business and I want more people to love his business. It's just how I roll, man. All right, so there's a real good question. I think Blake even answered it in chat a little bit, but I want to weigh in my style, right? I gotta find it. This one is bad when I lose my spot and then I have to go hunt down a question. It was basically is there here we go. Is FishTube oversaturated? Is there any room for new creators? If so, which niches are missing? Good question. So I would argue, much like Blake said, that there's always room for new creators. The problem that inherently comes with that is that eventually older creators the older creators have these huge advantages, but if you bring something different as far as your personality, your experience, your knowledge, the way you present things, there's always room. And I'll give you a great example of somebody who like came in, made a giant splash, and then like seemingly disappeared, and that's Robot Aquariums. Had this like really cool concept of how their videos were done. Only has 2 videos. They're great. They're funny. They're kind of animated. You don't actually see the person behind them. They've got this cool writing style to them. It's probably just too much work to make them all. But the thing is, it was so different that they got a ton of people paying attention very early for a brand new channel. Even people like Corey were shouting out his channel because it was different, it was interesting, it was fun. It brought something new to the creator space. You know, it's not just like, oh, it's just random Aquarist number 975 talking in front of a camera about why they like aqua-clear filters, right? You have to have something different. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a special niche that no one else is doing. I'm kind of lucky in a sense that my background allows me to talk about things in a way that's a little different than other people do. But at the same time, in the grand scheme of things, my channel is still very small, right? This is my fun. This is my fun. It's not my career. Unlike, you know, some of the other channels that are out there where you've got lots of channels that I think cover certain things very, very well. You know, you've got several channels that are more cichlid focused. You have channels that are more plant focused, like typically mine is plant and kind of equipment focused. You have people that are very live bearer focused. You know, Michael's fish tanks is a great example, right? He's guppy focused. But you have other people who do lots of live bearers, more like rice fish. You have people who are like live stream focused, where really the only thing they do is live streaming. They don't do a lot of like edited, pre-recorded content. You have people who have they're focused in on only shrimp. You know, Flip Aquatics is probably the biggest one in that space, but you've got lots of other people who just like shrimp is what they do, shrimp is what they talk about. And you might think like, how can you possibly make hundreds of videos about shrimp? But then you look at their channels and they've done that. So the question becomes like, if you look at the greater sphere of creators, is there something you do or present that's different than what they do? That's all it comes down to. A lot of it's personality. If you're just a personality who's a little different in a way that people find intriguing, of course there's room for other creators. But you got to remember, like, the biggest problem, quotation marks around that problem part, for any new creator in any genre is that you have to somehow be interesting enough for people to take their attention and their time away from someone else they were already watching. That's the hard part, right? Because if you are to have any level of growth, even slow as a snail growth like mine, right? You have to present something that is more appealing than someone else doing something in the same genre. Let me give you maybe some of the best examples. You have Green Aqua, right? We've seen lots of great aquascapers. You've got Yuri's, you've got George Farmer. I was about to like make fun of myself. I was like, how am I forgetting George's name? I'm supposed to do something with him this weekend. But you've got Dennis Wong for a while. He doesn't do a lot of videos, but what he does, they're really, really good. You have Aqua Pros, who does aquascaping oriented stuff, but you have Green Aqua, who runs a store, very high end, like ADA style store, lots of aquascaping stuff. But what did they bring to the table that's different than everybody else? Well, they have people who used to work in television, so they know how to produce extremely polished content. They have extremely good editing. They know how to light things so that you can see them cleanly and well. They know how to set up good camera shots. They know how to produce things at a very professional level. So when you are seeing their content, it's far more professional than, some dum-dum like me, right? And for a lot of people, that's extremely appealing, but they also have extreme aquatic knowledge, right? They have this beautiful store. They bring in all sorts of guests because this is part of the way that they run their program, and they've blown up accordingly, right? Their channel is huge in, 2 years? They've got to, almost 400,000 subscribers or something like that. I mean, they have a ton. MD Fish Tanks, right? MD Fish Tanks, in I think his first year, went from 0 to 100,000 because the way that he presents himself and his own, like he's doing aquascaping. He's built his own kind of like mini fish galleries until he had really committed to, after his channel had grew a lot. But he has a very vlog oriented style, which was not very common in the fish keeping hobby of YouTube. He has a different style. He's not necessarily doing anything different than some of the other channels are. He's doing aquascaping. He has ADA tanks. He builds theme tanks. Well, AquaPros does that, right? He does lots of nanofish. Lots of people do nanofish, but it's the style and the personality, right? He's got a lot of younger, kind of like vlog-oriented energy, and that's very different. So that's appealing to an audience that normally is used to watching like some dry old fart like me. Right? And so I think that's the big thing, and I know I've gone way long on this question, but I think it's actually really interesting because for me, as somebody who consumes a lot of aquarium related YouTube, mostly in audio in the background when I'm at work, I think you always find new creators. The question is whether or not they stick with it. We were talking about Fish Boy earlier, and he's kind of disappeared off the face of the planet when it comes to his content. He was getting this like pretty good growth, and then opened a store and like disappeared, right? So you got a lot of stuff like that where it's just kind of like, do they stick with it, and do they present something in a way, whether the information is different, whether it's in a different niche, or just the way that they present the same information that draws different attention than other people who are already out there. Long answer, right? That's what I'm best at. Talking way too long on a subject. Ray V got this. I want to, because it's on subject, but I want to mention this. FishTubers are just like mom and pop fish stores, just that they just got with the times. Back in the day, if YouTube was around, how many mom and pops would be on YouTube? Probably most of them. Yeah, maybe if they weren't like. You get people who are a lot older that don't necessarily aren't too technically savvy, but I think if you have them relatively technically savvy, you got a chance. Kevin Nybergall, will assassin snails kill nearite snails? Maybe. I mean, nearites are way bigger. Assassin snails are good at killing some of the smaller stuff like your ram's horns and your pond snails, and your bladder snails. But I mean, they are carnivorous snails, so in theory, yes. If you're really worried about like nearites, you could look at like loaches, because loaches will just destroy snails left and right. So like a dwarf chain loach or a yo-yo loach, stuff like that, they'll pick on them and eat them. But I think in theory you could do assassin snails. Also, nearites don't reproduce in your tank, so I'm not sure, unless you mean something different than, I mean, you kind of spelled nitrite, but I assume you mean nearite. Joe Davis. Are live streams pushed onto YouTubers, or is it more beneficial venture for them to, say, repeatedly posting new videos? Notice the switch to live streams, at least in this hobby. Good question. So I think it's two things. Live stream, I think a lot of smaller channels see bigger channels that have tons and tons and tons and tons of viewers, and they see like super chats come in, and they're like their eyeballs gloss over, thinking maybe that's the way to make money. And to me, I think that's the wrong approach. For me, especially, and some of my friends that I've talked to, live streaming is an opportunity to connect more directly with the audience, right? And that's what I think the tool is. And this is a tool, right? Live streaming is a tool in your arsenal of social media, if you will. That's where I think it's used best. Is live streaming is a way to connect directly with your audience. It's a little more free-form. It's conversational. It's not as prepared and managed. But you've got plenty of people who, like, all they do is live streaming, right? And that's their style, so to speak, is basically everything's kind of live stream in fashion. Even the videos that aren't an active live stream, they're presented like a more live and vlog-esque, if you will. And I would say that, like, in that regard, I think a lot of it is just people, especially during human malware, it's an opportunity to connect with people when you're, like, stuck at home, right? For me, most of this is just because my schedule allowed it during the grand lockdown, and it was easier in a sense at that time because I wasn't going to fish club meetings on Tuesdays anymore, which, you know, it's only one a month, but that takes up. There's also like board meetings that I was going to for my club, and stuff like that, where like I wasn't going to those anymore. So it would make sense to take that time and repurpose it. And for a while I was doing 2 videos a week, and instead I wanted to do live streams. I wanted to interact with my audience. I'm an extremely social person. I'm very extroverted when it comes to talking to people. You guys know I don't shut up, right? I love talking fish. So if I get an opportunity to do that once a week, it's like one of the best parts of my week, right? As far as the YouTube side of things, it is the best part of my week. Because like the prepared video is a lot of work, where this is just free form. It's fun. I get to talk. You get to read chat. We have this interaction, right? It allows me to know you guys as much as it allows you to know me. And I think that's just the best part about live streaming. Now, I think there's plenty of people who, like, they see live streaming and think of super chats and, like, this is how I'm going to make money. And that's, like, the worst way to look at it. But there are some who do it, and I know they do. But it's not, you know, and I don't want to throw shade at any specific person, but, like, if that's the way you think about things, you're going to be in for a rude awakening, because I can tell you the number of streams I get where I'm like, oh, I actually got a super chat. That's kind of sweet. I'm always surprised by them, because I think I'm in the opinion, like, I almost want to turn them off, but sometimes people, like, I get them every once in a while when people are like, they've sent me an email and I've answered a lot of questions for them, and that's their way to say thanks. And it's kind of like, also it takes a lot of work to, like, monkey with all the tools, and I just reset my settings and change my title stuff when I'm doing stuff, if that hasn't been obvious, right? It's how little time I get. But yeah, man. Yeah, I think a lot of it is just for the people who are doing it for the right reason, which is to interact better with the audience. That's why you're seeing more people do it, especially during all the different lockdowns because of human malware. It's an opportunity to socialize. It's an opportunity to interact with your audience better. And as much as we interact for some of us at least, interact in comments, you have a very different feel than when, you know, if I answer a question via email or via a comment, it's a lot different than when I, like, go on a 10-minute rant or side tangent because of one question you asked in chat, right? There's a very different feeling to that. And I think that's the part that it makes live streaming super fun for a lot of us, or at least for me. And also, like, I worked in radio. This is like my way to get back in touch with my radio roots, back when I had a dream of being like that person you would be driving home from work and hearing my stupid voice on the radio to just, like, hang out, relax, de-stress a little bit on the drive home, right? That was my goal way back when in my young my young 20s, that was what I wanted to do until I got the rude awakening of like, oh yeah, you're gonna work for minimum wage for like 10 to 15 years. It's like, what? No. We're not doing that one. I got motivated by that concept of being able to pay rent and bills. Oh God, Kelly, thank you. But yeah, I think that's why I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is a lot of it is the time that we're dealing with in the world. But yeah. Oh, I love this. I love this comment. Lumpy Dog. Too many fish tubers come off as experts on common Google fish keeping knowledge, yet they don't take their own advice and video document way too many mistakes in fish decks. Just my 2 cents. I totally agree with you. I think the biggest thing is, especially, you let me flip that from the perspective of someone who, like, I fully admit when I don't know about things, right? But I cannot tell you the number of questions I get that could be answered by a simple Google search. But the difference might be knowing how to search for that question the right way to get your answer quickly. Which not everybody knows how to do that. Like, not everybody is, like, proficient in Google foo, as I like to jokingly call it. And, you know, just I've worked in tech so long that you learn, like, hidden ways to use search engines in general that help you be significantly more powerful in your searching. But, you know, I think the biggest thing is there is a incentive from the perspective of being a creator of seeming like an authority on things because it's more likely for you to, in theory, get views. As opposed to, as you guys well know, I prefer to, where I am an authority, translate that knowledge. Where I'm not an authority, admit that wholeheartedly. Because then you know, if you ask me a question about like, okay, Bentley, so I have a betta and he's doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I've kept a few veil tails in the past when I was a kid. And every once in a while I've adopted an old man betta that I've kept in a fish tank. But I'm definitely not like Gian, who just spoke for Corey's Digital Fish Club, who's like a betta breeder and international judge and all that stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, bettas, they're cool. They're pretty. They can breathe from the surface of the water. Did I mention they're pretty? Yeah. You know, I'm like, I'm not an expert in that thing. So I think it behooves, unfortunately, what a lot of people like fall into a trap of. I think there's a couple traps in FishTube. But the biggest one is trying to never admit when you're wrong. And I think it's so much more important to admit your faults rather than try to feign like you're perfect. Because we learn as a whole so much better from failure, right? I think it's hard for a lot of people to put in their head that it's perfectly okay on a social media platform to admit you're wrong. I think there's a massive fear that you're just going to get like destroyed in the comment section or something like that, or that like the second you admit you're wrong, your channel's going to die. And that's not the truth, right? It's just being honest with people is so much more important than seeming like an expert. Being straightforward with your opinions, your knowledge, whatever it may be, whatever tricks of the trade you've picked up along the way, that genuine person is so much more appealing to somebody than like a character. I'll call it that, a character. Someone who is purporting to be one thing even if they're not. And there's even some of the largest YouTubers out there that do that, unfortunately. Ooh, Ryan, Too Many Fishberg. Assassin snails will gang up on snails bigger than them. There you go. So yeah, if you have a group of assassin snails, they'll tag team tactics like a pack of wolves. Apparently, see, thing I did not know. I'm not a big assassin snail keeper. I want to keep mystery snails, but I'm bad at it. And the thing is, I just don't feed them enough because I get paranoid about like just getting like the 2-inch, 3-inch thick mulm layer from how much they actually eat, given my work schedule and my maintenance. So the last couple times I've had mystery snails just given to me by some friends, I've probably starved them every time, thinking like, oh, I throw a bunch of extra food in all the time, they'll probably be fine. And then you find out like, oh no, they need 10 times as much food as you're giving them, you dum dum. And I've watched videos recently about mystery snails. So I'm trying to crack the code on the things that I'm not good at that I want to keep, right? And I watched one recently about mystery snails, and I just watched how much food they were feeding a tank of mystery snails, and I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. It's just like, oh yeah, I just starved those things. Oh, even if they were teeny tiny babies, I just did dumb and didn't do what I'm supposed to do. See? Didn't learn my lesson. Bob Purcell, if I'm thinking about joining your YouTube or Patreon, which one is better? So, I would personally suggest YouTube, if only because you then get like the badges and some of the emotes and that stuff. I mean, technically Patreon gives more of a percent to the creator, but I don't care about that part. Membership, for at least for my channel right now, until I can do significantly more with that, which that will take a significant difference in my life. But anyway, membership is kind of a very optional thing. Like if you really like what I do and you want to get an occasional behind the scenes glances and stuff, because it's not like all the time, it's perfect. There's a couple of things that also are there, like there's the members only Discord if you're a Pseudo McGill or higher, but you only have to do that for a month, and then you'll have the invite and you're fine, because I don't maintain it that hard, because it's there for fun, right? It's fun. But there's stuff like that, and then the Rainbow Fish level, that one has basically like priorities. So if it'll teach you a certain thing to do, that if you send me emails, I respond to them way faster, so I put them basically at the top of my list instead of going in the order I've received things. I feel like if you're gonna pitch me that many American pesos a month, I should give you something a little extra, right? It's just to consider that customer service, right? Right? But seriously, like even if you're just do autosync and call it good, I would say just do YouTube, because you get the badges, you get the emotes, and all the kind of the fun stuff for when you're here in the live streams. I can't make that happen with Patreon. I've actually been close to closing my Patreon solely to make sure that the people who are Patreon get those benefits, because I there's no way for me to enable it, to my knowledge, at least. I'll put it that way, to my knowledge. And we've proven very recently, I know very little. I know nothing about mystery snails, assassin snails, terrible at keeping shrimp, don't know much about bettas other than they're pretty. That's the point, right? We're supposed to know ourselves and be honest with ourselves, not fake it. Oh my goodness. All right. Just because I said I don't get super chats often doesn't mean like give me a super chat. Don't do that. That's not Stephen P. My super chat is worth slightly more than Kelly's, doing $5 instead of $4.99. Oh man. Oh Lord. Aussie Aquatic. Some online sales are almost perfect way to complement a channel, particularly with some simple things like live plants, brick and mortar stores. Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of it is what's convenient. If you already breed a lot of fish and you happen to have a presence and you have the time to then go forth and ship fish as well, it makes sense to open a small online business to ship fish that you're breeding in mass, right? If you're breeding enough to like ship them out regularly to people, totally makes sense. And I'm not against that. It's more like I wanted to present a topic where we ask a question and we look at it from two very different perspectives and see where these things are. Mark, who just became a member not long ago. Love your live streams mainly for the gems of information that happen in your rambles. Yeah, I think part of that is just like I learn gems of information by just listening to other fish keepers babble, and like I'll pick up random stuff from whenever I get to talk to Dean, and I'm always like, why didn't I ever know that before? Every time, like almost every time I talk to Dean, I pick up some little nugget of just pure gold, and yeah, they come out the same way from me. I'll just babble and random stuff that is generally helpful appears. Joe Davis bought a 4-month-old FX6 for $100 Canadian. What a steal! What a steal! So stoked. However, what are some pitfalls or got rods for this beast? I'm not familiar with that statement, but I will Let me answer a couple questions. So, maintenance on it is a little bit of a hassle because the sponges can hold so much stuff. It will seem like you are cleaning them out forever. So my general advice is this: keep your ceramic media just in some old tank water and wet. Like, I would just lightly rinse it if you've got a little bit of stuff. And what I mean is you just get a bucket of old tank water and just kind of dunk it up and down. But keep it in that water or some clean tank water. Take all your sponges and literally take them to whether you got a sink or an outside hose, whatever you need, and just don't care about the fact that you're destroying your bacteria colony in the sponges. Let the bacteria colony in the media fuel the canister after it services, and just thoroughly clean all those sponges and the trays out, because the trays will pick up gunk. The other thing is, when you do service it, don't be afraid to pull the pump off and look at the impeller housing and clean it up. And the other kind of thing is, like, on the big magnet for the impeller, always be looking for cracks whenever you service it, because if you start getting cracks, you can start running the risk of the impeller no longer functioning correctly, and you'll need to replace that impeller. So if you spot them early, you can order it ahead of time, and the next time you go to service it, then you'll have the impeller and just swap them out. Otherwise, like, FX6s can take a ludicrous amount of abuse. I have one that I haven't serviced for way too long, and it's doing just fine. I need to clean it. So basically, the other one that I went and bought a new one on my Guppy Mansion. Yeah, I know. Psycho went and bought another filter, but I had all those PetSmart coupons, so I got like $150 off, and then I forced them to price match it down first. So I only paid, like, I think it was after taxes, $165 or whatever. It's like such a steal on an FX6. Or no, that's what I saved. That's what I saved. I ended up paying, like, I think $200 with tax, but whatever. Still, good deal for a brand new FX6. And then I have the other one that I probably have to rip apart, and either I have to replace the impeller, or there's something in the motor housing that needs to just be, like, really thoroughly cleaned, because it's not spinning correctly. So I can probably recover that one, and then that one will basically go fresh on the tank that has the one that's been running for like 2 years now without service, and then I'll service that one and just have like almost a rotation going. And then probably what'll probably happen is that particular tank will just have 2 FX6s on it instead of 1, because that's my bigger rainbow tank. And while there's not a lot of livestock in it, because there's a lot of plants, it won't hurt them to have all the extra filtration. Why not? I paid for it, right? Might as well use it. Might as well use it. Ryan Too Many Fishberg, how do you change the amount? I don't know. Every time I've done super chats, I just pick the preset amount, and I've only done like 3 ever. But when I do them with style. Patrick Hardy, the onset, and then the microphone. Thank you, man. You guys are such a hoot. You're such a hoot. All right, I know there's another question in here. Hold on, I had another one from Joe Davis's. I'll make sure I didn't miss something. Okay, no. So far, no. I'm catching steadily up to chat. I believe, Dr. Black has arrived, which means that his stream comes up in about 15-ish minutes, so we'll take a few more questions. Stephen P. is saying that sponge is his favorite biomedia in most cases. I think sponge is just really good. Like, you're never really hurting yourself with more sponge. Can't say you're hurting yourself. Brian P. with the $5.01 super chat. Couldn't resist. You guys are one-upping yourselves a penny at a time, which is classy. That's the way that I do stuff. Because I'm a crazy person. Kelly is going to shift to the blue hair. Nice. All right. I had a question. Joe Davis, hot rods. Yeah, so it's really hard to hot rod an FX6. Other than, like, the media that comes with it naturally is kind of blah, and just putting a better ceramic media, even, like, the smaller ceramic rings that are just a slightly nicer quality, they have a really weird one that are in there. But, or at least to me, it's weird. Like, every time I get it, I just take the bag that's full of their ceramic media, and I go... I throw it to the side and go get other media that I have lying around. Because I just feel like there's much better quality media. And they don't give you very much either, which is So silly, but yeah, I think really it just comes down to just when you maintain it, and depending on your fish load and what kind of tank you're putting it on, etc. When you maintain it, just really thoroughly clean out those sponges because they hold a ton of gunk. A ton. When I was working on that filter, after I'd looked at the motor at first and cleaned the impeller up and cleaned the impeller housing, thinking it was going to be all right, and I must have missed something somewhere, but I spent another like hour just cleaning out the sponges with a hose in my front yard. This is so much bio gunk in there. The filter gravy, right? That stuff that's really good at starting new filters, except when it's at the FX6 level, it's like, you know, a banquet hall worth of gravy. It's just so much. I was sitting there for a while and like I was just power washing the one of the half ring sponges out with my hose, and I was sitting there like, how long will this water run dirty? Because there's just, and I was really honestly surprised when I swear I spent 10 minutes on one sponge alone, and finally was just like, I don't know that I'm going to fully clean this thing. I'm just going to move to the next one and call this good for now. It's only lightly brown water. It's not running perfectly clear because I can never get it perfectly clear. It's like, jeezy, crazy. Yeah. It's too much. Too much. Oh. Zen Ginger apparently already has pink and purple hair. It's going to blue next. You people with your colored hair. I just got this like silvery white mop on my head. Which, by the way, for the members, new emotes are coming. It'll just be a while. As the artist finally has like accepted my order. They just have a giant backup. Like, I think they said 20 days. It's gonna be a while. Geek Boy, 12 months. I'm going 12 years on my 306 canisters. You haven't serviced them in 12 years, or you've had them running for 12 years? I'm talking about I haven't serviced that one FX6 in basically 2 years. It's just been running the whole time nonstop. Because FX6s are like monsters and will take a ludicrous amount of abuse. Brian Scott mentioned that I believe the FX6 service manual recommends impeller replacement in 12-month intervals. Really, the impellers last way longer than that. Like the one that I have that's been going for 2 years, I bought that thing used. I had to get new tubes for it. It was the only thing I had to get because they didn't have the tubing they had was like just shot. But other than that, like everything's been the same. I've had that thing running for 5 years now. Yeah, 5 years. And it's just, I've never replaced a part in it. I've only cleaned it. And realistically, when it used to get serviced, it was like once every 6 months. Because I have other filters on there, and that thing just kind of workhorses. And it'd be when I noticed it was pushing more air bubbles out the outtake, or the output rather, it'd be like, oh yeah, it's clogged up enough, I should clean it. Now it's like just, I had it walled off for a while, and that got me lazy, and I'm letting the plants do a lot of work. It's just moving water around really at this point. Brian P, my FX6s have 0 chemical and 0 fine filtration. Yeah, I'd basically just use all the stock sponges that are in them, which are kind of coarse, and then I'll put in just ceramic media. That's my go-to with an FX6. I don't usually add any extra filter padding or anything like that because I want them to go as long as possible. I don't want to have to service them like every month or something like that because they can be a little bit of a hassle, you know. That's Stephen P. My sponges make the richest, heartiest filter gravy. I love that you folks have embraced the term filter gravy. It's so great. Kelly Foreman, it would be pretty easy to give you blue hair. Not my style. My lady really loves my hair the way it is, so that's not changing anytime soon. Paul Sotero, Fluval needs more of your money. It's true, they did. They sent me an email personally, said, Bentley, we've not had enough of your money recently. Buy some lights. Buy a filter. Where's your money? It's more that, like, I can justify an extra FX6 around my house. And I knew I had all the coupons from PetSmart on their rotating thing on their app. So it's like, oh, well, I'll save a bunch of money on it anyway. So I'm not spending as much as I would to get like an Awase or some other, or like the really big Eheim, right? You know, the one that has the giant turbo jet on the top of the bucket, which I think is a super good filter if you ever get it. Those things are like nigh indestructible, but ooh, they're also tough to find. Drew, man, I'm gonna pronounce your last name wrong, I'm certain. Howdashell. It's probably Hodashell or something like that, but give me phonetics on how to pronounce that because I'm curious. Hey Bentley, does it take your tank a few weeks to balance out when you start running CO2? My drop checker is green, but I'm still having bad algae and not much growth. Yeah, so it depends on the amount of algae, or amount of algae. Well, it does kind of depend on the amount of algae, but it depends on the amount of CO2 you're pushing and the general, like how much light you have and all that kind of stuff, right? It's a combination of things. In general, I would say that you're best off starting slow and slowly increasing your CO2 if you're going for a certain amount to allow your tank to adapt. Because the big thing is like suddenly having a bunch of CO2, your plants kind of have to shift what they can do at intake. And if you're not changing the amount of nutrients available at the same time, it can take a little while. But if you change those amount of nutrients immediately, you might oversaturate the amount of nutrients in the water, and that's how algae can just keep doing fine, and your plants are like, we're not ready for this, man. Chill out. Right? So a lot of it is just that your plants take a little extra time to shift and effectively convert to the difference in the water system. Now that they have this significantly higher available carbon source, if they have the appropriate amount of light, now they can, in theory, photosynthesize more and more and more. They need the extra stuff to go with it, and it takes a little time for them to kind of dial it into the higher gear, so to speak. But yeah, it's not that normal. It is an adjustment period, unless you start with CO2 right off the kick, right? Because then they're just used to it as they get in there. A Geek Boy, I service my 306s once a quarter or so. Yeah, so there you go. Who else? Lumpy Dog. Who else puts post-it notes on your canister filters with the dated last service? Man, I wish I was that organized. I'm like, I look at mine and go, when did I service that last time? It's only been like 2 months, right? Part of the problem is my time is so terrible. I wish I actually have looked at recently hiring someone. You will find this sad. This will be like one of the last notes I'll leave us on. There's one more question that I'll answer, but I have looked at potentially hiring someone who works at one of my local fish stores on the side to service my filters regularly and to do water changes. Yeah. So my schedule has been so bad that I have been actively looking into paying someone out of my own pocket to service my stupid filters. How terrible is that, right? I can't even be bothered to do my own dang work. But more just because I recognize that with a lot of the stuff I'm doing, I don't get time to do it as often as I would prefer. So if I had somebody that I would be like, I pay you this amount of American monies a week or whatever, and you come by and you do like, okay, I do all of these filters this week and then this filter next week, and every filter is getting serviced, say, once a month or whatever, in some kind of rotation, and they don't take some 2 hours or something like that, whatever's reasonable, so I'm not eating up a ton of their time. It's probably worth it to me for the overall like health of my fish and plants and all that kind of nonsense, right? It's worth it. My time is at a ludicrous premium. And yeah, best thing to do is schedule it on your calendar. That way you never have to guess. Yeah, I mean, there's smart ways to do things. And as we know, I do things dumb all the time. Paul Soltero, how many people find that their canister filters magically create Cory fry? I wish I had Cory fry in mine. What I did find when I had that filter stop pumping and I went and cleaned it out, I found 4 little baby guppies. And so I fished them out very carefully in a little specimen container, and then took them back to the guppy mansion and put them in there, and we were good from there. All right, Lewis, 500. You're giving me my last question for the night, and then we're gonna pass it on to Dr. Black. The man is coming up next. Have a beverage with him. It's my Aussie buddy. Starts in like 4-ish minutes. We'll get a link to that in just a moment, but let's talk about this question from Lewis. What about Rasbora cubitai and bamboo shrimp with snails in a 24 to 29 gallon? What do you think? Sounds great. The question is how many bamboo shrimps, how many snails, and how many rasboras, right? It's getting that balance. Now, if you only want like one bamboo shrimp or two, right, because you get those nice filter feeders, the big thing is making sure you have some kind of powdery food to feed them in your water column. Now, Rasbora cubitai, not a super big one, so you can have a kind of powdery food, and they'll be okay with that. Something that's really finely ground flake or something like that. And then snails is kind of extra cleanup crew. Not a problem. The biggest thing is making sure you don't overfeed so that the snails don't have a massive, ridiculous population and then potentially cause problems for like the bamboo shrimp or some other kind of issue. But I think in that gallonage range, you could probably easily keep 10 or 12 of the rasboras, have a certain number of bamboo shrimp, probably somewhere between 2 and 3 tops. If you only want one, that's probably perfectly fine too. And then depending on what kind of snail you're looking at, have a certain number of snails. So if you're doing like mystery snails, you might only want one because they do need a lot of food. If you're doing something like neorites, you could probably have 2 or 3. They're not going to reproduce. They don't need as much food as a mystery snail, but they still need some food. You need to make sure they're getting plenty of food. If you're doing ram's horns or something like that, you gotta just let them do their thing, like or Malaysian trumpet snails, something like that. Let them do their thing inside your tank. Just make sure that you've got calcium in their diet as well as in the water column so that they keep a nice, healthy shell. That's about it. Pretty simple. Just do your usual filter maintenance. Make sure you have good oxygen, especially for that bamboo shrimp because they like more oxygenated water. But pretty simple. Pretty simple. All right, let's go hunt down Dr. Black's stream for the night. Oh, what a fantastic picture. You guys, you gotta look at his thumbnail on this because it's very choice. It's very choice. He's rocking a primo haircut. Oh, man. All right, guys. With that being said, we're going to end it for tonight. We'll be back next week per usual. As always, thank you so much for watching. Real quick, we'll slam down the armada of super chats. You guys are way too kind. Stop doing this. Stop it. Keep your money. Fish Tank Barn, Rico Stan, new member Mark, Kelly Foreman, Stephen P, a double up from Patrick Hardy, and Ryan, Too Many Fishberg. But we cannot forget the 501, the true one-upsman, Brian P. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic night. And Danikin Aquatics, very early. I don't know if Danny or Kenny, one of the two of you, are still here, but very early, even though my YouTube doesn't show it in its history. Jerk. Thank you guys so much. And as always, stay awesome.